Peace, everyone. Welcome to Foundational Friday on Enlightenment and Transformation. Speaking, I am Chief Yuya, and I want to welcome all of you to this evening's experience, especially those of you who are first time listeners, and of course, those who are loyal and consistent listeners. I want to thank you for returning. Those of you who are on the phone lines, and those of you who are listening from the internet, and everywhere else that you're tuning in from, whether it be iTunes or whatever. But I just wanted to thank you all for coming here today. And this evening's show is a live show. I know. I didn't let everybody know ahead of time that I was going to be live tonight. I know. That's just because my day got away from me a little bit, so I wasn't able to do my usual pre-record. So here I am. All right. So, yeah, it's going to be a live show this evening. And I know a lot of people have let me know. I wish you would tell me in advance when it's going to be a live show. I'd like to call in. But, there's a live show every Sunday. So it's not like I never do a live show. There's opportunities for you to connect in different ways. But, yeah, in any event, we're here. And this evening, we're going to briefly talk about the power of words. The power of words. I'm going to give those of you who want to call in, who are listening, and again, I know it's last minute, but if you want to call in and speak, 347-945-7680, 347-945-7680, and just hit the number one. If you hit the number one, then I can hear you, you can hear me, and we could chop it up. And it doesn't even have to be about what we're talking about tonight. So I'm giving everyone this opportunity, if they want to call in and speak or whatever. They're welcome to do that. If not, that's cool too. We'll just go on with what we're speaking about. So yeah, the power of words is what we're building on. And last night, Thunderground Thursday, I dealt with helping people, right? Just that whole science of helping. And as many people commented, they were like, man, that was a quick show. And yeah, I was still, I do the shows impromptu, but before the show, I was kind of thinking about, okay, what do I want to say? And honestly, I couldn't really come up with too much because I was like, I've been talking about helping people since the first show. So I kind of even thought, I was like, why did I even choose this topic? To talk about helping people. And of course, there's angles I could have came at. But every angle that I really thought about was like, to really make it an effective show, I would have to some degree guilt people into feeling like they need to help other people. So I was like, that's not really the angle I want to come from. I don't like to do that. It's got to be in your heart. So, we went where we could go with it. I want to say peace to everyone calling in too. I see the phone lines are filling up slowly. And again, if you have a question, comment, rant, whatever, just hit the number one. We're going to keep it loose tonight. But yeah, so that was the deal with last night's segment. It was like, man, I just, either you're going to help or you're not. But so many people are so rotten that, they're not going to help anyone. So I really just wanted to speak about the people who are already actively engaged, like what the mind state needs to be a little bit in terms of when you're really trying to make some type of changes and help folks. And that really takes us to this segment, the power of words. And, for those of you thinking that this is going to be a show on mantras or a show on positive affirmations, it is not, and it will not be, because you can get that. A lot of people are talking about that. You can go on YouTube, anywhere, and get positive affirmations and things like that. But I wanted to speak about some of the effects of words sometimes that we experience that maybe sometimes we're not aware of. And I guess I have maybe a lot of experience in this area just because of the work that I do. I'm surrounded by people consistently who are using certain language to describe themselves or to describe their situations or even to describe their potential. And a lot of times I have to figure out ways in my language to overcome some of the negative primacy that they've put on themselves in terms of how they view themselves and how they regard themselves. So as much as many of you think like I'm just a loaded cannon when it comes to my mouth, that it can be further from the truth. Those who know me personally know I don't really even talk that much. So when I am speaking, every word is carefully selected. Even if I'm cracking a joke, there's something in that joke. So a lot of times you have to learn as a priest really how to become a wordsmith in order to defeat spells and programming that people have on them from other words that have been used towards them. You keep in mind that in the world, reportedly, there's over 7,000 reported languages. Okay, so 7,000 languages. And think about that for a second, like just in terms of like the amount of ethnic groups and nationalities that we have in the world. Language in your reality, it frames your perceptual reality. Your language creates the frame. So if you have over 7,000 languages in the world, that means you have over 7,000 perceptual realities of what something is. And that perceptual reality is the true power, right? I mean, let's look at it. Let's look at a simple thing, all right? I'm gonna share an example, right? So we look at how we perceive things and the power that they have. A lot of times, especially when we're speaking about nation building and things like that, we speak about, well, you need power. So we may say money is power, or there's power in unity, there's power in education. He's going. We can find all these different things where we say, well, that's what we have to do. We got to do that. We got to get land. We got to grow our own food. We got to reclaim our spiritual systems. We have to educate these babies. We got to eat right. There's so many different ways that people perceive and approach to power. But a lot of times we don't realize that language is a key piece, because the language, if it frames your perceptual reality, then your perceptual reality, to break out of that frame, you're going to have to either understand the science and the mastery of said language that's framing that reality, or you have to introduce a new language into that reality, which breaks that current frame. That frame can no longer support. You see? So language becomes a powerful tool for freedom, a powerful tool for releasing yourself from a certain frame. And what is a frame? A frame is of course, a box. Like I was thinking about, as I was thinking about this segment, what I was going to say, I was thinking about perception, right? So I was saying, a good example of how sometimes we can let others' assessment or an assessment of what we don't know affect and corrupt our value systems. So I was thinking about situations sometimes, and maybe this may not be as prevalent anymore because the value systems for money has changed so much. But I remember seeing, or even times trying to offer a child $1, and them seeing the nickel and pouting because they wanted the nickel or the quarter because it was shinier, it was prettier, And I've seen situations where you put a dime or a nickel in front of a child, and they'll want the dime. They'll want the nickel. Why? Because it's bigger. So the nickel to them has more power. It has more value. It has more worth than the dime does because of how they perceive the dime. So things that are smaller have less value than things that are bigger. So give me the nickel. And the dollar looks like just regular paper. It's ugly. It's green. The nickel is shiny. Nice new shiny nickel. Give me that. And the truth is, a penny is worth more than all of them. A real copper penny. So when you really start to look at how we perceive the perceptual framework of our world, and then how we assess and apply a value to it, it becomes very interesting. Okay, so when I was speaking about how there being, like I said, over 7,000 languages in the world, and then we look at that and we say, okay, well, 7,000 languages equals 7,000 perceptions, or more than 7,000 perceptions. And these are reported languages. And keep in mind that a lot of languages have been taken. A lot of languages have been stolen and reworked and demolished and done away with. So, these are the reported languages, right? But when we look at that, if we look at, again, that perceptual framework, it takes me to an article I read some years back that I personally, I thought it was interesting. I mean, you may not think it was all that interesting, but I thought it was kind of interesting. And they were, this is at a time when I was really heavy into learning like a lot of the African click languages, and I was really interested in the tonal languages, but the ones that have the, and I was really interested in like what's going on there. When someone infuses that level of percussiveness inside of their language, what kind of person would do that? Because to me, language was always the first identifier of culture. As soon as you hear somebody speak, you already know what culture that they're coming from, or at least you start to get an idea. It's a cultural marker, language is. So I was reading this article years ago, and it was sharing how in Australia, amongst the Aborigines, that they didn't have a word for like going left or for going right. There was no left or right in their language, but what they used was directional markers for their language. So they would say, go down the road, then turn east, then turn west, and go north, then turn west again and come south. That's how they would give directions. So I thought that was very interesting. So even if they said like, hey man, let's say if like there was a fly on the top of your arm, the article was saying like you say something to the effect of like, there's a fly on your northwest arm. You see? Now, if you know anything about Aboriginal culture and you know about like the walkabout, you know that direction and navigating is a central element to their rites of passage experience. Being able to have great orientation. And what this individual found who wrote this article was that those Aborigines who spoke in that manner, they had this amazing, almost like supernatural sense of orientation. Even when they would put them inside of a building and blindfold them and put them in in a place and like spin them around, they still had a sense of where north, south, east, and west were. Okay, so what they then did was another experiment where they laid out a set of cards and they told them to arrange the cards in proper order. Like they didn't tell them what proper order is. They said arrange them in proper order, right? And they found that the Aboriginals always would lay the cards out, each one of them from east to west. Okay? And it didn't matter, and they would face them south, they would face them north, they would face them west, they'd face them in different directions, and they found that they would always lay out these cards from east to west. And they found that people who spoke English, though, would lay the cards out from left to right. So then they got a focus group of people who spoke Hebrew, and they found that individuals who spoke Hebrew would lay the cards out from right to left. To me, like I said, maybe interesting to you. To me, this is very interesting because the Aborigines, what they dealt with was that sun vibration. So they're saying we're going to go from east to west because that's the movement of the sun. That's the movement that the day makes. So that is the natural order. So if you tell me to put something in order, I'm going to put it in order of the highest star in my system. And that star goes from east to west. When you're dealing with English speakers, they laid them out left to right because why? That's the way we read. That's the way we write. But then when they took English speakers who were also Hebrew speakers, the Hebrews laid them out from right to left. Why? Because that's the direction that Hebrew is read in. So you see that even when they took a comparison of English and then took that same comparison of English people who also spoke Hebrew, Hebrew beat out English in terms of cultural supremacy, to the point that became the first rate and natural order of those individuals. You see? So you start to understand language plays a much bigger part than in how we perceive things than we think. And the language begins in the mind. The language is not just what you speak. I know that's why sometimes people have a lot of problems with positive affirmations and things like that. And it's because positive affirmations really cause you to look beyond the collective identity crisis that individuals have. You know, when we come into African traditions, the way that or forget even African traditions, when we come into like a more deeper indigenous knowing, or we desire to come into a deeper indigenous knowing, or we just want to do away with our current orthodoxy, whatever system it is that we're dealing with, one of the first things we want to do is get initiated. Why? Because the initiation is the word that resolves in our mind the identity crisis that never was resolved before. Okay, so just like if you look in any system or religion or whatever, you'll find that a lot of times when people were appointed to do certain things, that there was a divine spirit or demon that called that individual out and said that this is so and so. You know, even when you look at the Christian law and you have, you know, when the dove descended, when, you know, in the water in Christ, and he said, this is and God said, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. So that was an affirmation by the divine. And through that affirmation by the divine, then we begin to loosen the grip of the identity crisis that we suffer from. So many people look at initiation that way. If I can get initiated, and I mean, I might even receive a divine name, but if I can get initiated, then I now can receive the affirmation from the divine that I never had before. So one of the things that we get from that experience of initiation is we get a name. I mean, our first understanding really of the power of words is the power of our name, right? And that's our first experience. And what becomes important in understanding that is that our words, the perceptual framework that's created by our words, begins with how we identify ourselves within the context of the divine in the universe. That's why, going back to the article I referenced earlier, when you had English speakers and you had Hebrew speakers, the Hebrew speakers identified themselves as Hebrew. Yeah, they spoke English, but their cultural, ethnic, and most importantly, spiritual and divine identification was Hebrew. So when they gave them the cards and said, okay, now put these cards in order, they put them in order from right to left. You see? Because they're saying my divine ordination or my divine affirmation or my divine initiation comes in the form of me referring to myself or acknowledging or accepting the divine appointment of being Hebrew. So now that frames the order for any and everything that I do in the universe. It comes from that perception. It comes from that avenue, that angle, that perception, right? Being a Hebrew. So you find that the words or the names begin to scape or to landscape the psyche. And once the psyche begins to be landscaped, then the identification becomes more clear. You know, once the identification becomes more clear, then you have different habits, right? You have different behavior. You have different actions, right? Because even one of the markers for culture is what? Your clothing. And the word habit, which also connects itself to haberdashery, means garments. So your habits are your actual garments. Your habits are formed by your words, which are formed by your thoughts. Okay, so your words and how you perceive yourself and the identification and the names that you take on will then also transmit itself to your habits, which in a physical sense transmits itself to your to your clothes. I did a show on habits. I mean, I would advise anyone listening, check out that show. It may give you, you know, a different kind of insight based on what I'm saying. But you'll find that the interesting aspect of this is that there are times that your habitual language habits and your linguistic behaviors can actually be the destroyer of your dreams and visions because of the fact that your thoughts lead to your words, which leads to your actions. So habitual thoughts become habitual words, which become habitual actions. And the actions being the clothing that we wear, we realize that our clothing clothing slash actions let others know which words that we're living by. You see? So, like I said in one show recently, I think I used that little piece of clip, we have it now, as the introduction. What, you know, like in Chief Speaks, we got these little introductory little clips where people said little things and whatnot. And one of the things that somebody said before was, you know, in dealing with what we're living by and the words that we're living by, I'm trying to remember the introductory phrase that was said. All right, skip that. I don't remember. I'll come back to it. But anyway, my point is I was saying our clothing slash our actions, let others know which words that we're actually living by, which words that we've actually invested ourselves in, which again is a marker of our culture, our action, our clothing, our language. So a lot of times we reject good words because we want to keep our traditions. Now, what I want you to do when you consider the term and the idea of tradition, I want you to correlate tradition with habit, because in truth, that's what traditions have become for us. They've become our habits. So when we say that someone rejects good words, good instruction, good game, however you want to look at it, a lot of times they'll reject it because they have formed a habitual pattern or habitual processes that now overrule whatever it is that's going to be their actual actions. That's why, again, in that particular experiment, when you had people who spoke Hebrew and they also spoke English, they were willing to forsake whatever the actions and the words, or the actions and the behavior and the habits that English had, for the tradition and the habits and those of Hebrew. You see, so what happens is that when we begin to change the quality of the words that we use, we begin to change the quality of the image that we have of ourselves inside. But the danger is, like I said, sometimes we reject good words because we want to keep our habits. Okay? We don't want new clothing. We don't want new actions. We don't want new habits. So we reject new information that comes to us. And sometimes our search for tradition rules over or rules out or trumps, really, the words of power that are looking to come into our life that can explode and take us out of the current perceptual framework. So we have a cop-out where we say, well, that's not traditional. This is not traditional. You don't even know what tradition is. You have no clue. How do I know you have no clue? Because when did it start and when did it end? How far back can you go? You see? I don't care if you tell me, well, we've been doing this for 1,000 years. So what? We've been on the earth for 1 billion years. So when did tradition begin? And when did it stop off where we said, okay, from this point on, we don't need anything further. We don't need anything added to. We've created the Bible of whatever our traditions or our best habits will be. You see? And that now, when we do that, when we stagnate in that way, we crystallize the image of ourselves that we have inside of us. This is why you have these identity crises. So in order to break out of that crystallization, we say, I need to get initiated, or I'm going to go get ordained, or this or that, so that I can take on a new set of habits. And the issue is we don't understand the transformative aspects of knowledge. Knowledge is how the words come to us, right? So the first thing that you have to understand is that your tradition, we talk about our tradition like that's our inheritance. Indigenous tradition is not your inheritance. Knowledge is your inheritance. Okay? And the knowledge is transmitted verbally or orally. We always say the oral tradition, but it's transmitted verbally and via literature. You know, we have such a hard time imagining that our ancestors wrote things down. But they did. They wrote a lot of things down. You know, just like we have a hard time imagining that they had metal money. It's so beautiful for us to think, yeah, they used cowrie shells for money. No, some regions did, but they also had mints. In Yoruba land, there were coin mints. They pressed up coins. That didn't just start in Greece. Okay? So taking in that new information changes the image. But the challenge is The challenge is we got to remember that our ancient doctrine or our ancient knowledge is our inheritance. Okay? And the engrafting of those ancient words, the engrafting of that ancient knowledge becomes those powerful words that are inside of us. And those powerful words inside of us begin to shape the person that's on the outside of us, because we start to get a different image of ourselves. So we have to begin to get an image on the inside of ourselves of somebody who actually has an inheritance. Forget, I don't know where my people are from because of the Ma'afa. And you have an inheritance. Your inheritance is knowledge. Just like Sister Felicia and Sister Kim always, like when people ask questions, they say, well, listen, he did a show on that. There's over 340 shows or something, whatever the number is now. What they're saying is that this man has left his children an inheritance. Forget whatever I can provide. We got eminent domain. I could say, well, here, babies, this house or that house is for you. That stuff could be snatched up and bombed and knocked down. But the inheritance of knowledge is the inheritance that now allows them or helps them to shape the identity of who and what they are. So those who feel like Hebrew are their inheritance take on a Hebrew identification, which now shapes the perceptual arrangement of their own mind. So they don't have disordered minds. They don't have cognitive dissonance. Their minds are ordered and arranged by the perceptual reality as given and imparted to them by the inheritance of powerful words and doctrine as given to them by their ancestors or ancestors that they co-opted. Another show. Okay? So you learn that you can't maintain your current image and at the same time overcome your current issues. So we use current words to try to overcome the issues that we're going through. And you have to use your inheritance to bail you out of your situations. Your inheritance is knowledge. And when knowledge is engrafted into your mind, the knowledge of your ancestors is engrafted and embedded into your mind, your perception of how you work with the world changes because words change your mind. And when your mind is changed, you live by the power of the words that have been handed to you by your ancestors. We know the words are powerful. That's why you're scared to say them. You rather say your Harikis and your Aduras. You'd rather say those in English because when you say them in an indigenous language, it starts to change things inside of you. You know, this is a Kemetic proverb. The kingdom of heaven is within you, or the kingdom of the Netir is within you. Whoever knows himself will find this kingdom and will know that they are the children of the living Son. I usually don't say the whole one, but that's more of it, right? So the kingdom of the Netir is within you. It really says also there's another wall text that says that the kingdom of the Netir is outside of you. Okay, so but the whole science that we're saying is, how does that kingdom come alive inside of me? How do those Netir come alive inside of me? By claiming my knowledge inheritance. I claim my knowledge inheritance by allowing the words of those who gave that inheritance to come alive inside of me. You see, by seeing myself and having the image of myself based on those words of power, not just professing them. I'm a king. I'm a queen. It's deeper than that. Because just saying those words doesn't mean that the ideas, the principles, and the doctrine that come along, remember I talked to you about principles the other day, that come along with taking on those titles, it doesn't mean that that's embedded inside of you. Because the truth is, if you really took your doctrine from your Egun, you wouldn't call yourself a king or queen because that's not your label of power. That's somebody else's label of power. See, this is where faith comes in. You've heard me say many times that faith is the acknowledgement of the unseen knowledge. Faith deals with knowledge, not belief. But let me expand that definition for you who are listening. And the call-in number, if anybody wants to call in, it's fine. If you don't, it's cool too. 347-945-7680. You just hit the number 1. Okay. Faith, I'm going to expand that definition. Faith means that I say the words that I say about myself, the words that I say about me are the same words that the deities and my Egun say about me. That's faith. Think about that for a second. Think about, let's take it. We'll bring it down a little bit. We'll take it to grandma and grandpa. I have elders around me. There's one elder. Every time he sees me, he says, "Man," he said, "Baby, you beautiful. You beautiful." He always says it to me, "Baby, you beautiful." He says, "Man, you out of sight. The things you do," because I help him out a lot. And, like when it snows, I go shovel his walkway and everything for him and bring him food. And sometimes I just go kick it with him. Sometimes I go and sit in his house with him and I show him dirty pictures on the internet on my phone and say, "Hey, look, man, look at this one. Look at the size of this woman," So he likes stuff like that, because all his family's like church people. So when I go over there, he can keep it real. He's in his 90s, so he wants to go out smiling. So he always says, "Man, baby, you're beautiful, man. Baby, you're dynamite." So, I laugh when he says it, but he will be one of my national Eguns. I'm not putting a death sentence on him, but since mid-90s, okay? So, but the thing is, with that understanding, can I see myself in the same image that this Egun, this ancestor, or this deity sees me in? That's faith. Calling myself not for where I am, but calling myself for where my principles are guiding me and working me to be, and making that the internal dialogue, not just the external dialogue, but making that, do I call myself the dynamite inside? Do I call myself a good man inside, a helpful man inside? Is this how I perceive myself? Because if I have a connection, thinking cultural inheritance, then I will begin to have a connection with how that cultural inheritance perceives its children. But if I remove myself from that inheritance, then I'm damned to hell. However you want to perceive hell. And I'm going to show you how you move yourself into a place of damnation. Because then you begin to take on the culture and the characteristics of an alien, which corrupts your perception of self. You forsake your inheritance for the words and the identity that an alien gives you. We say, in our Yoruba tradition, we say the world is the marketplace, right? The world is the marketplace. And Oya is the owner of said marketplace, right? So now when we come down to the marketplace, we're dealing with all sorts of things, especially in the form and in the name of projection, thought projection, right? Thought projections that have nothing to do with our actual minds, our actual true identity, but identities that we've projected out into the world and it projected out into our life experience because of fear and because of an identity crisis. Always looming they gonna do this, they gonna do that, they doing that, they doing this now, they said this, they. That's nothing but a projection. They doesn't even exist. That's a projection in your mind because you feel you need to have a they, because you're finding excuses not to live by the principal words and doctrines of your Egun. You don't want to accept your inheritance. So you've replaced it with the fear of they. So what we have to do is to learn how to go into the marketplace of the world and deal with alien culture without the alien culture going into us and putting us in the marketplace as commodities. So, to make it clear again, we have to learn to go in the marketplace and not let the marketplace go inside of us. We have to be able to go amongst aliens, but not let the aliens go inside of us. Okay? And this deals with the words and the principles that we study and making them alive inside of us, not just having this culture and this doctrine as a shirt that we wear, but it has to be alive inside of us. I'll show you a really quick example of how we approach words and things, right? a lot of times people will call the show, or they'll call me for consultations, and they'll talk to me about certain things, right? And again, let me give you all a calling number, 347-945-7680. You just hit the number one. All of these shows are impromptu, so I know sometimes you feel like, man, I don't want to break up your flow. People tell me later when I'm talking, but I could go for hours. So, it doesn't break anything up. All right. Because right now I'm just sharing. I don't have a script or notes or anything in front of me. But when you're functioning in your identity and your character, you'd be surprised how easy things are. I was born to teach. I was made to teach. So this is easy. You tell me to go wash some dishes or something. then it might be a little tough. It may not happen right now. But like I said, we have to go into the world, but not let the world go inside of us. We got to go into the marketplace, not let the marketplace go inside us. And I show you how we deal with words and how sometimes we attack certain things and we take on the sickness of a wrong attack. So, for instance, a lot of times people will call the shows and stuff and will say, man, I have a demon that's in my life, right? Or I have this beast that's in my life. My life is suffering. We've equated life to a demon, or we've equated life to a beast, right? Let's think about those words for a second. You hear it all the time on Chief Speaks or whatever. People call and say things like that, right? So what is the reaction? You see? If somebody says, man, there's a demon, or there's an entity, or there's a beast. So I'll give you an example like this, a real world secular example. If we say, yeah, man, crime has become a beast on Wall Street, crime has become a demonic beast on Wall Street, crime in New York. So then our response will be, okay, well, we have to slay that beast or slay that demon. Now, how do you slay that beast or demon? With equal aggression, right? So we'll say, well, we need more policing agents. We need more policy agents to fight crime. We need more jails, and we need harsher sentences to fight crime. And this is all because we've equated the crime to a beast or to a demon. So now we have to slay it. You see? We have to fight it with aggression. But what if we said that the crime on Wall Street has become a self-regenerative virus? Okay? If we say the crime on Wall Street has become a self-regenerative virus, then how do we then approach that issue? It's viral. Well, then we look for preventive measures that will solve the root cause of the issue and not just mask the symptoms. We look for better education. Okay? Because how do you fight disease? It's like when the whole AIDS epidemic, what do? They go and they educate people about safe sex and how people can catch AIDS and things. Education. We look for ways to provide an immunity to the virus, to the greater public assembly. The actions that follow a select word can be the difference between effectiveness and ineffectiveness. Just that one thing. And then you'll start to learn, when you look at that, something as simple as that, you'll start to learn the codes. You see? You'll learn why certain things are called a beast. The beast of Wall Street, the wolf of Wall Street, and not the virus of Wall Street. You see? Or I'm in the belly of the beast. Yeah, racism. Yeah, it's a beast. Not, I'm in the midst of the virus of racism. Because you think virus, you think cure. You think beast, you think I just got to fight it. But it's a proverbial beast, so you can't fight that. There's nothing to fight. You're fighting a ghost. We'll put it that way. You see? So the issue of language reveals so much of words. I was talking to one of my clients recently who's he's a bishop, right? I have several bishops, so you won't figure out which one it is. It's okay. But he's a bishop. He has a very large church congregation. And he's been my client for many years now. And we were talking about just the inherent nature of people. He was discussing some of the issues that were going on in his church, and he was asking me for some counsel on how to deal with them. So I was telling him that based on the literary premise of the environment that's been created by the literature and the words and the doctrine in his church environment, that the word itself, when perceived and delivered in a certain way, makes the people bad. You see? And he was like, what do you mean? I said, look at your 10 commandments. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. I said, the 10 commandments were not written, or were not shared in the way that they have been shared for a people who were righteous. They were written for wicked people. So righteousness, and I told him, when you're righteous, you in right step with God. That's what it means to be in right step. You're in alignment with your divinity. You're doing what's right for the moment, because your divinity mutates. Your divinity changes, believe it or not. So it changes. But those commandments were written for people who were wicked. So now when you have your people reading those commandments every Sunday and posted up all over the place, you're delivering to them a message that they are inherently wicked, because they came into an environment and have to be told immediately, thou shalt not, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that. It wasn't written for people who were righteous. You see? So the power of just a few words, it could change a couple words in there. It would change everything. And I referred them to a New Testament scripture when they asked, Jesus in the book, what is the most important commandment of all this? And he was like, love God with all thy heart and love your neighbor as yourself. So he was like, yeah. So he went off on a thing like, yeah, because, that brings us back to the commandment. I said, listen, man, forget all that commandment stuff. This is the bottom line. The 10 commandments, what is basically being said is love God and leave other people's stuff alone. Leave it properly alone. Don't touch stuff that's not yours. And love God. That's your 10 commandments. Done. 2. No B&Es, no breaking and entering, no shoplifting, and treat other people the way you want to be treated. We're done. You see? But when you now infuse all of those thou nots, you're telling me I'm wicked. But within my identity, I don't feel that. I don't feel this inherited misstep that you're telling me that I inherited because of first original sin. That I inherited someone's sin. No, man, I inherited someone's knowledge. That's what I inherited. And that knowledge allows me to now have an identity where I didn't have one before. The identity you're trying to give me is that I was born a sinner, and I can't really be any better. I would have to keep repeating these 10 commandments. I can't move past that. But my inheritance from my Egun tells me something a little bit different. It tells me that I have Orisha that are all around me and all within me that are waiting for me to grow up. And it delivers to me a body of knowledge and information on how the planet works, on how the planets work, on how the sun works, on how the moon works, how air works, how water works, fire, stones, minerals, crystals. Now, I got to be something to get at to. It's a lot of knowledge. Got to be about something. I just can't be a filthy wretch that is just glad that my ancestors saved a soul like me. No. So I need to start seeing myself the way my Egun see me. Because just like when I do consecrations for people, when people get their divine names from me, that doesn't come out of a book. I don't have like a book of 1,000 divine names or something. Although maybe somebody should write that book. But I don't have a book like that. So those of you who have received a name from me, that name came from divine inspiration. And 9 times out of 10, in the moment that the name comes to me in that precise second, I don't even know what it means. So I'll meditate on it, and maybe because of my linguistic knowledge, I'll say, oh, that's such and such and such. And a lot of times, I'll speak to someone who may speak that language, because I don't always end up giving people Nigerian names. So I'll speak to someone who speaks that, like, what does this name mean? And then it'll usually 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10. I never had an instant where it didn't line up with what I thought it meant. So, then I do the research further and say, oh, this is why that name came through for that person. You see? But that identity, that name that's delivered to me for that person during the consecration comes from who? their ancestors. Their ancestors ordained them as a member of said community. And when you know who and what you are in said community, you don't have all this identity crisis foolishness. I know who and what I am in my community. You know, a lot of the sexual confusion that we are experiencing nowadays is because of identity crisis. A lot of the sexual confusion, those who are confused about what they're supposed to be doing, and I'm not talking about sex styles per se. I'm talking about just even how they present themselves. What is a man supposed to do? What is a woman supposed to do? It's because of an identity crisis. You see, when somebody tells you your name is Ola Ade, we'll say, or Olade, which would probably be the word. I just, begin with that. But Olade, Ola meaning wealth, but Ola also means like tomorrow. And think about that. Why would the Nigerians make the word for wealth and the word for tomorrow the same word? Think about that. Ade means the crown. So the crown is the wealth, or the crown is the wealth of tomorrow. Or usually when you say Ade, it means the crown supports. So if your name was like Omi Ade, it would be like Omi is water, but it's not just water, it's the serenity of water. So the crown supports the serenity of water, or the crown supports serenity. Olade, the crown supports wealth, or the crown supports tomorrow. Then we have to get into the discussion, what is the crown? But all the while, right? I know who the heck I am. I know who I am. In my community, I am the crown of serenity. If that is, if that is who you are. For me, Yuya, right? Yuya. My mother told me my name. She said, Yuya is the same as Joseph and Yusuf and Joseph. And Joseph was the dreamer. I used to get in trouble a lot for that in school because it just was not interesting. The window was so much more interesting to me than multiplication because I already knew how to multiply. I used to teach myself at home everything I need to know for school. So I just stare out the window and try to find. I used to always like to see if I could see like leprechauns and stuff out the window. I figured if I stared long enough at nature, that whatever was hiding in nature was going to have to show itself to me. I used to stare out the window though. Of course, you get in trouble. Stop daydreaming, right? My mother was like, "Look, my boy is the Joseph of the Bible. He's a dreamer. That's what he does. He interprets dreams and he dreams." So I was cool with that, because my pops didn't like it. He was like, "Oh man, that boy, what's wrong with him?" I was all over the place, But when you start to understand your identity, hey. Maybe if it wasn't for that, there would have been no Chief Yuya. If someone didn't say, you're the dream interpreter of the community or of our family. This is what you came into with that name. That name means something. You see? So you think about that, okay? You think about, and I'm not just talking about names, and I'm talking about the perceptual framework of a word. The perceptual framework of a word and of a name and how we react to such. Like I said, you call something a beast or a demon, we react with how we react to a beast or a demon. We call something a virus, we react in kind to how we call something a virus. We call something tradition, or we call something culture, or we call something the truth, or we call something the system. How do we respond as such? Because a lot of times when we say tradition, we're looking for something that supports our habits. Because what is tradition but a habit? You see, so we'll look at if the tradition doesn't support our current set of habits, we don't want to have anything to do with it. So when I come along and I say, well, nah, man, what have you been doing? And then you run it down on me, and I say, well, man, that ain't been working for you. So A, B, C, and D, right? Then it's, oh man, Chief is a meanie. He wants me to do everything. I had one sister tell me once, you acting like I need to get a whole new life. And I said, yeah, you do need a whole new life because your life stinks. Look at it as garbage because your habits stink. Your habits stink because you're always saying stupid stuff to me all the time. So that means I know you're always thinking something dumb. I had to tell her that. You know, and it was so funny because one of my partner was like, he was sitting outside of a car. We were in the car talking, and he was outside. But I guess he was eavesdropping. He was like, "Hey, brother, that was harsh, man. Brother, you know what you said to that?" I said, "Shut up, man. Get out of here with that." I said what she needed to hear, man. She knows she's got dumb things come swirling around in her head every day, and she knows she's around and exposed to all this great information. And her clothing habits, haberdashery, her habits won't let that new information in because she doesn't want a change of habit. She doesn't want a change of mind. She doesn't want a change of doctrine. She doesn't want to live by the principles that were handed to her by her Agun. So she's mixed matched some Western garbage into our tradition. So she doesn't take on the clothing of the tradition, the habits. She maintains the habits and the clothing of a Western mind while toying and playing with the keys of African liberation. That makes you crazy. And it makes you say crazy things. And it makes you do crazy things. You see? Your sanity comes from understanding the evolution of habits. Because you know what insanity is. We talk about that definition all the time. Doing something over and over again, expecting different results. Like a bad habit. Or I'm going to wear the wrong clothes. Okay, so like, you know, I don't know, whatever's out of style. You know, I'm going to wear some two-toned AJs and a Shams shirt with an anchor, a necklace with a gold anchor on it, you know, and a Virgo sign. And I'm going to go to the club with that, you know, and a shag. Don't forget the shag. And a shag. And I can't figure out why the ladies won't give me any play. I'm sharp. I'm fresh to death. I'm sharp, but no one's giving me play. Because, man, them old habits don't work anymore. The world has changed around you. The same way the tradition changes, the habits change. Because the mind changes. The words change that we use. We can't use the same old words anymore. It doesn't work anymore. You see? So the names even change. We're always trying to reach back for some old embedded habit, some old embedded in tradition, instead of reaching back for the old embedded knowledge. Because a lot of times when you look at the disopportune position that you're in life, it's because of the traditions. The traditions didn't work. You look on the continent, even when you look at polygyny, people talk about, yeah, because back in Africa, practiced polygyny. Yeah, man. And they had senior wives and junior wives. And you know what? A lot of times they was at each other's throats because that hierarchy didn't really work. There was always somebody vying for position. That became a tradition that we inherited, really, from another group of people that came in. You remember, there were people who came in before the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French. There were people there before that. Okay? And we took on some of their marital traditions and the perceptions of how we had about even our women. We started to see them as property, as cattle, that could be traded like commodities. What did I say earlier? You got to learn to go in the marketplace, but not let the marketplace go inside of you. Because once the marketplace goes inside of you and you allow your perception to be corrupted by alien traditions and alien thought, then you do nothing but become a commodity in that marketplace. That's why LL Cool J said in the song, you're only a customer when you're walking in the presence of hustlers. Think about that. You're only a customer when you're walking in the presence of hustlers. You're not hustling. You're not wheeling and dealing. You become nothing but a consumer when you're in that environment. Because you don't realize the hustlers are always doing what? Elevating their game. Seeing what's going on in the world and elevating their game accordingly. But not you, because you're searching for this elusive tradition that doesn't even exist. So now you become nothing but a customer and a consumer. The marketplace has now placed you on a shelf as a commodity. We can get into the whole birth certificate thing and the Social Security card, but this is where it began. This is where it began because you began to identify yourself by the tenets and the identities of an alien culture. That's why when you get pulled over, the first thing you ask for, license. To do what, man? I need a license to drive this. Come on, man, stop playing. You know I don't need a license. This is not farm equipment. I don't need a license to drive this. Get lost. You go to court, what's the first thing you say? Are you so-and-so? You know, no, I'm not so-and-so. I'm me. I'm a human being standing here. They'll show you a piece of paper. Is that your name? Is that you on that piece of paper? No. See, they play little slick word games. Is this you? No, it's not me, fool. That's some letters written on a paper. I'm standing right here. This is me. You see? Because what did we inherit from our ancestors? Some really comedic common sense. Some really interesting common sense. You ever hear Ghanaians or Nigerians argue? The points are like it's hilarious how simple the points are. Basic common sense. I'm not going to get wrapped up in a lot of your foolishness. I used to tell a lot of people that, man, when I used to do a lot of work doing different things, you know, like especially situations where I had to guard like certain spaces or whatever, or, you know, like personal security, I would tell other people who work with me, listen, man, don't let anybody speak to you beyond 2 sentences. You know, if you got somebody who's in a space that they're not supposed to be and they go beyond two sentences, just hem them up. Grab them by their neck and their genitals and take them out the door. Because if they start talking, and I used to do that all the time, I say, man, you quick with people. They used to call me Hassan Chop because my last name was Hassan, I knew. But they would say, you like the Chinese cartoon, Hassan Chop. Because as soon as people start talking, man, get out of my face, come on. Because I would say, if I let them talk too long, I'm going to start believing them. I don't want to believe you. I used to do the same thing with the children. When children would do something bad in the house, I say, man, what happened? They come in there and they say, Baba, They're 2 sentences, you getting a spanking. Because I'm going to start believing you because you're slick like me. You got my blood in you. So you start to learn how not to become a customer when you're walking in the presence of hustlers. All right, that's been our Foundational Friday. I want to remind you all, no commercials this Friday because Blog Talk did something funny with the audio file. So anyway, sign up for the Herbs webinar. Many of you have been signing up. Awesome. Keep it coming. Come on. You need to get this information on these herbs. It's important. I've been working with Sister Kim on the webinar. So it has my stamp on it. We got some good stuff in it. So you want to make sure you sign up for that. And of course, this Sunday, because today's Friday. Yep. This Sunday, we'll have more Chief Speaks. 11 a.m. Eastern. Make sure you call in earlier, participate. You could also send in emails too. We're going to set up an email box for Chief Speaks, and soon we're going to be on the internet. We're going to be not on the internet. Dumb. We're going to be on YouTube. All right. So look forward to that. All right. But in any case, thank you all for listening to me for the amount of time that you heard me sit here and talk about the power of words. Think about it. All right. Everyone, enjoy your Friday. Be safe and be well. Hotep Pu, Ankh Uja Seneb, Uhuru Sasa, Odabo, Odara, Sawubona, and all that good stuff. All right. Nzuri Sana. Peace.
If you are interested in learning how herbs can be used for healing and magic, then join us on September 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern for a power-packed Anu Nation webinar. The Spiritual Gifts of Herbs live webinar will be hosted by Kim, who is the host of Anu Asafo and a member of the Sadulu House Spiritual Center. Some of the topics will cover how to use herbs for specific uses and spiritual practices, discerning which herbs are best for men and women, and why certain herbs are associated with male and female deities. Those who RSVP early and attend the event will receive 25% off Anu Nation products and services. Simply go to anunation.org/events and register before September 13th. Learn how to choose herbs to create effective rituals by attending the Spiritual Gifts of Herbs webinar. See you there.